Go. Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Succeed. This is Gearface. I'm joined today. I think this is my first recording in 7 or 8 months. I'm joined today by my good friend Blue. Blue, thank you so much for being here.
Always happy to be here, Gearface. And hello, everyone. Sorry for being a giant ass buster and not doing any of these for the last however long Gearface said since the last one he recorded of these.
I forgive you. We'll see if the audience does. Today, I'm very excited to talk about Ken, one of the characters that I think when we first started planning this back in the far off year of 1989, this was one of the characters that you sort of jumped at first as being sort of a slam dunk of a lesson. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about him. I know that you are a stalwart Ken representative.
That is true, yeah. He's one of my favorite characters in the whole game, so hopefully I'll be able to teach him well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're going to be just fine. So as always, couple quick disclaimers before we get started. Number one, you should play Exceed for fun. You don't have to play Exceed for fun. I recommend that you do. We're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. That doesn't always line up with playing Exceed for fun. If the lines of play we're describing don't sound fun to you, I recommend that you do not play that way. Play the way that you find fun. You'll play longer. You'll have more fun. You'll probably win more in the long run. Disclaimer number two, we don't know everything. I don't know anything. Blue knows some things. I would say you're going to hear us be pretty prescriptive about strategy on this show. There's going to be a lot of always do this, never do that, although Blue is quite a bit more even-handed than some of my guests tend to be. Expect some prescriptive language. Take it with a grain of salt. Like I said, we don't know everything. Exceed's not a solved game. Find your own lines of play with Ken. He's a very flexible character. Tell us why we're wrong about all of our evaluations. But yeah, all that said, Blue, please, I'm dying to know. Tell me a little bit about Ken.
All right, Ken Masters is a Shoto from Street Fighter. Lesson done. Glad to have explained the character. Anyways, jokes aside, here's Ken's character ability. We'll start here. It's pretty basic. Action, close one, draw one. Similar to a character like Baiken. I know I did the Baiken lesson before.
Mm-hmm.
What this essentially represents is that you cannot escape Ken. He will be in your face, and he will be throwing shit at you. Because his economy is pretty solid, and his positioning is pretty easy to manage so long as he wants to be in. With that in mind, we'll have to evaluate the kit and see if he actually wants to be in as far as possible at range 1. Spoilers, the answer is no. So a big part of actually playing Ken is managing your positioning and options in relation to your positioning, such that you aren't getting owned by the fact that you, even though you can get to range 1 very trivially, don't necessarily want to be at range 1.
Right, and I mean, compare his best goodest friend Ryu here, who has a very similar looking action. The presence of draw a card gives me some added spice over Ryu. Ryu can back up with his action. Yep. Ken cannot. So if I just mash this over and over again, eventually I'm going to wind up at range 1 to my opponent, and at that point I'm effectively just pressing the prepare button whenever I use my character ability, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
With that in mind, the Exceed mode actually does change up those dynamics a bit, but I will talk about the Exceed mode in a bit.
Okay. So, but in general, this is something that I will use to get in to the extent to which I want to get in, and hopefully no farther.
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
And if you need bigger steps in this, you have boosts. May I recommend Run, which is the boost on cross, or Backstep, which is the boost on assault. Both of those are pretty cool at allowing you to do big movements. Ken also notably has this cool boost rushdown style on Shinryuken. You don't actually need this very often, but it does exist.
Okay. So if I'm up against like a really, really hardcore zoner where the little micro spacing jockeying for positioning that I'm doing in neutral isn't going to be enough to deal with, I don't know, Sagat's low tiger shot, I can move way in if I need to. But for the most part, in sort of like, I mean, notably, this doesn't cost me a card. In fact, it gains me a card, so I can position while I'm building my resources, as long as I'm positioning myself in a sort of toward my opponent direction.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. And
It's also worth
free value.
noting
I
that
don't really. This isn't in competition. I don't have to spend any resources for it. So this is just something I'll use when I want to use it.
yeah, more or less. And it's also worth noting that in the Sagat matchup specifically, you actually have a thing that completely dunks on low dagger shot.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard stories about Ken Doken, being an unreasonable projectile. So I'm looking forward to learning how to use
Yeah, it's
that.
pretty. It's a pretty badass card. But yeah, so you mentioned zoner matchups, and for the flightier zoners, the ones where you might actually want rushdown style, that actually is the one spot where I actually think the Exceed mode has some real utility. Because, as mentioned already, right up front, I don't think that Ken's range 1 is so good that this Exceed mode is actually all that appealing most of the time, because our raw card quality is just simply not high enough that we can just throw cards at the opponents, and let our econ do the work for us, while we just permanently are at range 1 striking at the opponent.
Okay.
So with that in mind, this is mostly not great unless you're fighting a character where they can threaten like action compressed movements, and your ability to negate some of that, in addition to probably having better card quality in melee than they do, is enough. So like a matchup like Rachel is where this starts to shine. But otherwise, I mostly would recommend not exceeding with Ken.
So, like Exceed design wise, a lot of times card quality and action compression are on sort of a sliding scale with one another. Like you can have things that are really good, or you can do those things really fast, and you can't always do both. If you can do both, it's probably costing you a lot. Ken's
Yeah,
action compression is locked behind a gauge paywall. So if he needs it to keep up with somebody who is action compressing their way all over the arena, probably that character just can't compete with this.
yeah, they won't be able to compete with your stats, and also the like economic value that you're getting off of your Exceed mode, like being able to effectively have kind of a Giovanna shaped ability where you have draw and then strike, so your strikes refund themselves rather than costing you a card,
Right.
is like actually like working for you.
Okay.
With Rachel specifically, also the fact that you would just have to pay a small upfront tax that has a when you exceed, draw and close, um, like a action that refunds itself force wise, and then for the rest of the game, if she ever wants to dump her hands to try to get away from you, you can make it so that the maximum amount of distance that she gets away is much lower.
Right.
While like maintaining her econ, means that she's going to be like suffering from like some pretty bad economic stress. So like finding the situations like that where it's cool is good. But again, I think that you mostly want to spend your gauge on other things, because Ken has some pretty badass ways to spend gauge.
Okay. That makes sense. So most of the time we're going to be spending our time as this Ken, and that's going to be good enough for us. I mean, it occurs to me that like most of Exceed combat is centered around range 1 to range 3 ish anyway. Like most characters are best somewhere in that range. It's where the normals hit. That's where a lot of our combat is going to be centered. If I don't need to maintain action compression or use these big boosts to chase down a zoner, this might just be good enough for my purposes, even not counting some of my crazy gauge payouts.
Yep, it is often good enough.
Okay.
And now that we have talked about the ability for honestly longer than we probably needed to, let's talk about Ken's kit.
Yeah, please.
Here's Axe Kick. You know Axe Kick. You've heard of Axe Kick. You might recognize it as Yozansen from
From
Baiken, but
Viking's
it's
kit,
basically the same
yeah.
card.
Okay, like literally the same card almost. I mean, this one's got a critical effect on it, but on curve, range 2, 5 power, ignore armor is with. So I think what we said about Yozansen is that it is very boost receptive.
It certainly is.
Okay.
And similar to with Baiken, it makes some of our boosts really scary. It makes just the action of boosting Grasp at ranges 1 to 2 a very threatening play. Like these are plays that the opponent has to respect and has to be able to respond to meaningfully, or they'll just die.
Right.
With that in mind, a very famous Ken line that I'm actually not personally fond of, so I'm not going to be talking about it much more than right now, is what I like to call Axe Kick Turbo. Here is basically Axe Kick Turbo. You boost your master, you confirm the value of it with Axe Kick, You hit this twice. That's 14 damage. You play Shinryuken later. This is like you probably do it like EX, maybe with quick attack if you want.
Right. Do
And that's going to be
11,
like
11 or 12.
yeah, 12 to 13 damage depending on exactly what you're throwing.
And I can probably find one more damage throughout the kit.
Yeah, and then just like you hit the opponent with grasp or something
Right.
while building to your Shinryuken, and that's the line.
Right.
I think that line has a lot of holes in it, and those holes are that if the opponent knows how to play against that line, you're throwing away a lot of value on this. You are going to throw away a lot of value on this because the opponent is just going to like block it, and like the dynamics of this with block are kind of weird because it is a very efficient attack with regard to converting gauge into power. That's in fact literally all it does is convert gauge into power at a efficient rate.
Right.
But block, like if it's your game
force
plan,
into armor at a efficient rate.
Yeah, block does the same. And if this is your entire game plan and the opponent stops it, then you might just be left out cold with no options left to actually close the game.
Okay, and I know enough about having had a Ryu lesson. This boost looks pretty familiar. This is tech bait. So
yes.
One way that my opponent is going to be stopping me is just saving their techs for this, and now my axe kicks are a whole lot less scary, although it's still a scary card. I've got other boosts I can use on it. And then, as you said, block for this. Between the two, like those are normals. I'm not even considering the character specific stuff they might be throwing at me. That's the kind of counterplay you're talking about that I just might not be able to get past.
Yeah, and it's like I will say this right now. For a character like Ken, who is very reliant on mid speeds and by default then reliant on landing mix-ups, which when he lands mix-ups, he's hitting you for 5, 5, 6, 5, 4, but it's a 7-speed attack,
right.
11, 8. He shits damage like fucking crazy.
Right.
So he doesn't need that many interactions to actually kill the opponent. But every interaction is very important for you to be representing and winning. So like you don't want to be predictable, because if you're predictable, then the opponent is not going to lose to your mix-ups.
Sure. Yeah. So he not only does he resist this line as not only are we pushing back on this line as a specific Ken play, we're kind of pushing back on the idea of lines in general, or a line in general. Because if you are playing prescriptively with Ken, you're not throwing mix-ups, you're not using his flexibility to your advantage. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you're predictable, you are answerable, because Ken's options are this thing that it basically reads that the opponent has like 20-ish life usually, and then a mid speed, a really bad slow, a bad fast, and then 2 mid speed ultras.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of mid speeds, and then like kind of low quality slows, slow and fasts. Like
I can see, like, you know, the very first lesson that I had on this show was Akuma, right? Who has a similar kind of like a lot of his cards need a little bit of help. And I can look at this boost and say, wow, that's the help I need to make whatever I'm doing unanswerable. But the way that you're describing Ken, I can't actually sustain an unanswerable game plan. I actually do have to interact with my opponent and throw things that they might be able to respond to.
In my opinion, that is correct. There are people that have found success with playing just pure level 1 Ken, as I call it, Axe Kick Turbo line.
Yeah.
So if it works for you and you like playing it, go for it. It is up to the opponent to stop your level 1 and force you to move to level 3.
Okay.
But I am mostly going to be talking about the less obvious uses of the tools in this lesson, because I think everyone knows that you can throw Axe Kick the opponent twice to deal 14 damage and then hit him with Shinryuken, and the opponent will probably die if they don't do anything to stop you.
And when you say you think everyone knows that, we're including in everyone my opponent. So let's assume that they're going to be counterplaying that, and let's talk level 3 Ken then. I think is kind of what you're saying.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Question about Axe Kick as an attack. I mean, we compared it to Yozansen a second ago. This has before close 1 on it, meaning it's great at range 2, all the stuff we just said, on curve at range 2, awesome. You were kind of foreshadowing this a second ago that I don't actually, we're not sure I love range 1 that much as Ken.
Yep.
So this is also, it sounds like, slightly depositioning me from where I want to be. That shouldn't stop me from playing this card when it's good. This is Axe Kick.
That is,
It's a
yeah,
legendary card.
it is one of the best ever, and it is definitely your most important card, and that also means that it is the card that you should be the most careful with how you're playing it.
Okay.
Because this is the kit that this is the card in your kit that enables you to do the rest of your game in a lot of ways. So with that in mind, knowing that this is the great enabler, what does this enable at ranges 1 to 2? It enables Tatsu. To a degree, it enables Nibash, and to a degree, it enables Shoryuken. So how does it enable these cards? Well, this is a extremely fast ignore armor attack, but that notably doesn't stun slows as printed. But that's fine, because if we want to stun focus, we have this boost.
Right.
Which also means that if we ever play this boost and we crit at ranges 1 and 2, the opponent has to by default respect Axe Kick. This means that we can get away with a lot of really cheesy mix-ups, like playing Tatsumaki Senpukyak or playing Sweep, to punish the expected response, like expected answers, to a 6-speed, 6-power Axe Kick.
Right. So this particular combo, Overpower Axe Kick, beats focus and block, but not sweep.
Yes.
Overpower Tatsu, actually any Tatsu, but overpower sweep beats sweep. To be explicit about what you're saying, okay. And I notice, I think this is something that I did know about Ken from previous conversations with people. This does not have a crit on it. That doesn't matter, because the crit for this card is that they think it's Axe Kick.
Yeah.
Okay.
The opponent has to respect Axe Kick, because if you play a crit, they're not respecting Axe Kick, then they are choosing to lose to Axe Kick.
Right.
And so all of our attacks when we play a crit, have the implicit property of the opponent is probably not going to play block.
Okay.
And that means that they are forced to actually interact with our mix-up structure. And our mix-up structure is a card that beats cross, period. This card outspeeds even EX cross and covers it. This card also like chases and beats cross at ranges 1 and 2 if you crit it. So like if you're expecting EX cross, both of these also cover it. But these cards are mostly not ones that I actually like throwing in that way, for a few reasons. Mostly this one is just like kind of mediocre, and a lot of the things that it does you don't actually need. So like I mostly just throw this at range 1 if I want to throw it as an attack. Just, yeah, here's a range 1 button that like does decent damage at 7 speed.
Right.
It's a gauge. It's 4 damage.
So when we're talking about Axe Kick, like on offense, Axe Kick covers like raw cross, not EX cross on its own just fine. It's speed 6. Yeah. These also would handle any sort of DP that my opponent has for the most part.
Yes, and similarly, Sweep also covers a Dragon Punch, because most Dragon Punches only hit for 3 or 4.
Sure. Okay. So that's another component of the mix-up that's enabled by Axe Kick to some extent. So I'm standing at range 2. I put down a boost. I crit. I have options based on what I think my opponent is doing. These sound like they're specific, other than character-specific options. These sound like they are particularly for EX cross. This sounds like it's the mix-up option for Sweep, which is something that I really care about beating.
Yeah. This is the one that dunks on the dunks on slows, but especially Sweep, which is the one that Axe Kick doesn't cover by default. And that also means that in the non-overpower version of this mix-up, this is basically the 50-50 right here. Is these two cards with these accenting specific options.
Okay. Okay. This beats. I'm sorry. Excuse me. This beats focus just fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like I need Axe Kick to beat to scare them away from playing focus. And now that they've done that, well, this beats Sweep. This beats Sweep and focus just fine. This beats block just fine. And honestly, most other things. Okay. So these are mix-ups on their own, irrespective of overpower.
Yeah. And then overpower intensifies the mix-up by making it so that the opponent has to be a lot more committal in what they are choosing to call, because this beats everything slower than it effectively. This beats everything slower than it except for Sweep, and then this beats a lot of things that are faster than it, and a lot of things that are slower than it, with basically the exact exception of the opponent's focus, but also like, are they really going to play focus?
Right. Right. Okay. So and the obvious call out to the mix up, or rather the obvious thing, the thing that Axe Kick, like, this particular combo beats the hardest is focus. So
Yeah.
we can kind of low key ignore that option unless they really call us out hard.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so you can already see how this mix-up shape is very high EV for Ken, because if the opponent calls it wrong, they are eating 6 or 7.
Right.
And those are big ass numbers. You don't need to hit the opponent for 6 or 7 that many times for them to just simply not have life anymore.
Sure. Notably, sweep is a good card, and it hits for 6.
Yeah, and if you eat the opponent's sweep by stunning them with your own sweep, you didn't just deal 7 damage. You dealt 7 damage and also prevented them from hitting you for 6.
Yeah, I mean, when
That is
like,
a 13 like point life swing that you just attained with the mix up.
yeah, you don't win clean for 7 very often in Exceed outside of a lot of boosting or an ultra. That isn't really the kind of math that Exceed supports.
And Ken takes the playbook of Exceed and goes, I'm at a range where I'm awesome. Call this shit.
Right.
And
right.
so I've talked about overpower already. I'll talk a bit about quick attack. Quick attack is the other option for customizing your attacks and pushing them in different directions. One of the big things that this is useful for is effectively turning Axe Kick into a Dragon Punch, which is useful in late game scenarios. Because it's a 5 power, 7 speed, ignore armor attack. Like,
Sure, yeah.
it's
If they have 5 life left, you don't care
Yeah.
anymore. Like, the game is over. And also, if I have Ken prepped and I'm at range 1, this is now effectively a mid speed. It might actually need the speed support to get on curve. Okay.
So like this is useful for that. It's also useful for like making it so that your assault is speed 6 at range 3 or range 2, to make it so that the opponent can't beat assaults. There's also the famous use of making it so that Shinryuken like is 7 speed, 7 or 8 speed, because you can also play at EX. It's actually very easy to play Shinryuken EX.
You're not going to use Rushdown style super often.
It is similar to Ken's Exceed mode. It's a matchup tool. The matchups where it's relevant, it's pretty relevant. Those are also matchups where you can just beat up the opponent and they will be low on life. You don't actually need Shinryuken that much.
You don't need Shinryuken, of course. Okay. So this is another way to confirm Axe Kick in close range. It's another way to close the game out. I mean, also, +1 speed now strike feels like it'd be pretty good. Like, he's Mr. Mid Speed. Seems like it'd be pretty good on my spikes and my dives.
Yeah, really great with dive, really great with assault. Has funny uses with cross. I'll talk about Ken crossing in a bit after we move away from the range 2 part of the Ken lesson.
Okay. Sure.
It's a consistency tool, and it also is an attack customization tool. If you find a situation where you're like, man, I really wish I had an extra speed on my attack, boom, baby, there you go, you have it.
There it is.
And that is what these allow, is for a lot of like player expression and creativity with your offense, in the way that like a season 7 character gets with these 2 boosts, by being able to nudge the stats of them in different directions.
Sure. And I assume because we sort of glossed over Tatsu at other ranges, right? Like, if we're not using this if you move past the opponent effect on Tatsu, it doesn't seem like it's a particularly good card if I'm not getting the mix up with Axe Kick.
It is a very bad card at ranges 3 and 4. It is very useful at both ranges 1 and 2. It has an additional useful property at range 1, which is that it advances 2, which means we go from a range where we're kind of jank to our best range.
To where I can land Axe Kick the most for free.
Yeah, where all of our mix up is live and is really mighty. So that is something that we appreciate.
And a lot of opponents are going to feel a lot safer playing sweep when you're at range 1 to them versus when you're at range 2. You can just as easily beat their sweep with spike. You might be able to get a little bit more hits out of Tatsu if you throw it at range 1.
That is true, and also because Tatsu exists, if the opponent isn't respecting it, then it's true they'll play range 1 slows. But if they are respecting it, like if they are aware of like Ken's mix-up shape and that he has effectively a command grab at range 1, then they're going to be more likely to play like the defensive grasps like defensive grasp, defensive cross, defensive assault, which you can cover with these cool attacks or just like playing honest yourself.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like
And
they're going to be more reticent to play their own slows on offense or defense because you can call them out.
right, and so now those options are shut off. You can just play on curve or play fast, and like you said, that kind of explains your use case for Shoryuken, that it's just a speed 7 button that does some damage. Cool. Well, that seems a lot better when my opponent is terrified to play slow into me.
Yeah, and also notably that means that like we have a like kind of grasp, except like in some ways worse, in some ways better, and then we have a command grab. So like we have a range 1 mix-up that exists with these 3 cards, and Axe Kick is technically part of that as well. And this means that the opponent is actually, assuming we have these options up, forced into actually like playing mix-ups at range 1 and choosing things to lose to, similar to at range 2. It's just that the actual options that we have are lower quality than they are at range 2.
Right,
but they still do a lot of the same.
Isn't at its best. Sure. Okay. So when you talked about quick attack a second ago as being sort of a customization tool to make your Axe Kick at range 1 or closing out the game or anything like that, the fact that Tatsu is specifically a mix-up card enabled by Axe Kick, whenever I hear about command grabs, the advice that I get is make sure that boost the first copy, sure, but make sure that 1 is live to make sure that your opponent is respecting it. Be careful boosting your second copy. Is that still true of Ken?
Ken has very funny option management as far as that goes. You probably are already starting to see it, but literally all of these cards have relevant attacks on them.
Yeah.
And they all have relevant boosts on them, except for Axe Kick, which has a boost that you should never play ever.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that Key Charge is a great boost, especially like season 3 characters will love their first gauge for critical. Doesn't matter. I need Axe Kick way too much.
Similar to Donkey Kick on Ryu, this attack is just simply too high quality for you to want to give it up for a free gauge.
Okay.
Go play Zangief.
Go play Zangief. Mash double lariat. Mash its Key Charge instead. Okay, so this is not a boost. This is an attack all the time. Everything else, I should assume, is sometimes a boost, sometimes an attack, maybe sometimes force.
That is correct. And with that in mind, it's hard for me to tell you, like you should keep a copy of everything live because that makes your mix-up its strongest. But also, you can't be afraid to not play options because you need to keep things live. You have enough damage through all of these cards and a little bit of redundancy in specifically like this covers a lot of the same things that Kneebash does. So as long as you're willing to pay the premium of playing Gurren Tsumpikak for 3 gauge, you're basically playing Kneebash, but it hits the opponent for 8.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. And so maybe I can give up a copy of Kneebash if I'm willing to crouch on this as an attack. I can, like you said, with the customization options, maybe I can make a sweep counter out of overpower sweep, and I don't need the Tatsu in particular anymore. So I can kind of find redundancies by making them with these now strike boosts.
Yeah. And now that I've talked about that, let's talk about the other funnier mix-up that the character has, which is the ranges 3 to 5 mix-up structure.
Okay.
Here's your ranges 3 to 5 cards. This one also is a range 6 card. If you're at range 6 and the opponent is not stopping you from throwing Hadoken, congratulations, you won the game.
You won the game.
The opponent needs a specific option to beat this, or otherwise you have won the game.
Yeah.
And if the opponent has a specific option to beat it, like Ryu does, for example, then just move into a range where it's a mix-up again.
Right. I undersold this card for a long time because I learned Ryu very early on playing Exceed. If you don't have Ryu Doken, this card is really hard to handle.
It's really fun.
The Fireball meta sort of the threshold of safety I've learned in melee ranges is 6, right? Like that's what Sweep has. Like that is what we think of as being like a reasonably safe card. In the Fireball meta, it's 5, right?
Yep.
This hits harder than it probably should, and that's a problem.
Yep.
Okay.
And if the opponent needs 2 of these, they have probably lost the game. They've taken 12 damage.
Right, probably
At
uncontested.
minimum, they've taken 10.
Right. By the way, for people who we sort of glossed over it, this card is loopable.
Yeah.
Similar to the Ryu projectile. This is not something that you hit them with once and then you lose it. As long as you're hitting, you still get this card. So they are forced to run in and fight you in melee, where the rest of your stuff is really scary.
Yep.
Okay.
And like similar to low tiger shot, if the opponent needs 3 of these, they have actually conceded. So like they can't eat more than one of these without it being a really bad situation. So they have to react to this one immediately. Because like with Ryu Doken, they have like they can eat like 2 of them before they actually like need to meaningfully respond to it. So you can take like a move 1 forward, spending a card from your hand or something, and then do that again. And then hopefully you'll be to range 3 by then. And then Ryu has to either spend resources to establish range again, where he can throw it out safely, or concede that he is probably going to trade with you via like sweep or spike if he wants to play it again.
Right.
Ken doesn't play that game. If you eat his fireball twice, you are in a really bad situation. You need to answer that shit immediately.
Okay.
And that sucks. That's a really bad situation that you put yourself in.
Okay, so this is terrifying. I'm not seeing. We talked before about how Ken has a little bit of difficulty backing up, even from range 1 to range 2 might be something that we need to specifically address how to do. Going to is my threshold to throw this card range 3, or am I really looking for range 4, 5, or 6?
If you're not a coward, you can totally throw this out at range 3.
Okay.
It has things that it like loses to that it doesn't lose to at other ranges. The big one is that it trades with sweep, but like if you're trading even with sweep and then looping this card, who cares?
Right, you're feeling okay. It loses to defensive assault, but as you said, cowards don't lose to defensive assault, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, and also that means that it enables you to play crit assaults as a way to bait out the opponent into responding with assault.
There we go. Okay, so that similar to the axe kick Tatsu thing. Assault does not have a crit on it, but yes, it does because Hadoken has a crit on it. So how am I getting back to ranges to throw this card in the first place? Is this something that my opponent is going to do because they need breathing room, or is the threat of this card so much that no one is going to cross out against Ken?
If a character is crossing out against Ken, they are not respecting Hadoken, or they can beat it.
They have a plan. They have a plan for it.
They would do it.
Okay.
So unlike with other rushdown characters, I have some great news for all the aspiring Ken players out there. You can cross out. This is the card that is a viable option for you to play on offense or defense. You can play it at range 2, you can play it at range 3, you can play it at range 1. Because backing up is great for Ken because you have a real range 4 to 6 mix-up slash payout with Hadoken, mix-up with Knee Bash, which I'll talk a bit about Knee Bash in a little bit. But yeah, this is a real card, and it's much realer for Ken than it is for almost any other rushdown in the game. Because Ken doesn't have an avenue to get back in. He has avenues to get back in as well, but he can also just fucking kill you at range.
He doesn't need a way to get back in if he has Hadoken live because you need to come to him then.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. And I mean, backstep is also a way to backstep. Is the fact that you can't that's your turn. You're giving your opponent a chance to respond to you. Cross is something that you can conceivably do on defense. Are we looking to cross out more often than we are looking to backstep?
Assault is a more useful card for Ken than crosses, just because of kit shape. Okay. If you want to backstep, go for it. If you need a little bit of breathing room, you want to force the opponent to react to the fact that you've set up range 5, go for it. It's great against scrapplers. It's a bread and butter play against, for example, Iron Tiger, because even if he uses his ability to pull you to range 3, you're just playing the range 3 mix up against Tiger.
Right. Yeah, you can probably make that work. Okay. So that's our similar to Axe Kick, we have this dominant threat at range. And then here's the things that Axe Kick enables. Tell me about Knee Bash and how that interacts with Hadoken.
So you can say that Knee Bash is a pretty bad card. It is firmly a utility card, but it's a utility card that does a deceptive amount of things. this is an anti-zoning card because it's effectively a Tatsu if you crit it. Like Ryu's Tatsu, a good Tatsu that it has defensive utility.
Right. It's like a slow dive type thing.
Yeah, it is. That is actually the shape that you see a lot in like more recent seasons is the slow dive before close 3 iteration on this shape.
Right.
Like Night Raid Vortex or Travao, for example.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Close 3, 5 or 6 guard, speed 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like in a lot of ways one of the original iterations of that shape. It is more expensive than those, and it is not strictly lower quality. It hits for 5 notably, but it is mostly lower quality. But similar to what it enables over here, where it's like, yeah, it is a relevant thing that the opponent might have to choose to lose to if you play it. Over here, let's say you are fighting Ryu. If you play a crit at range 5, what is Ryu going to do?
She's going to crit Hadouken.
In all likelihood, yes. But you played Knee Bash, and now you're at range 3, and you hit him for 5, and he hit you for 4.
Okay.
You didn't strictly win that trade, but you did numerically trade up on Ryu when he used his answer to your Hadouken against him. Because of the existence of this mix-up right here, you can sometimes just say, I don't know, bro, are you actually gonna play the Hadouken? I can answer it if you do.
Okay.
So it's like you're still forcing a 50-50 on people that even can answer it because they usually cannot answer both Knee Bash and Hadouken simultaneously. And if they can, they're playing an Ultra.
Yeah, and they're committing pretty hard to that. So there is a very similar dynamic between Axe Kick and Tatsu and Hadouken and Knee Bash. It's just that when Tatsu works, it stun sweep clean. When Knee Bash works, it trades up on Hadouken by 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, also establishing different positioning where because if you go from range 5 to range 3, you are setting up a position where then if he wants to play Hadouken, like you can sweep it, you can spike it. Basically, you're moving from a range where there's a janky mix-up into a range where there is more meaningful mix-ups happening.
Okay. And obviously, I mean, we don't want to discount the fact that Knee Bash does have like a guard. It will probably go off in a way that Tatsu you are doing a little bit more of a risk. So this is like risky mix-up card, safe mix-up card kind of thing.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And similarly, as mentioned, Gurren Peacock serves as a higher reward, somewhat lower risk, but expensive iteration of Knee Bash in this mix-up. Gurren does have a notable property of that Knee Bash, or lacks a notable property that Knee Bash has, which is Gurren only hits 1 to 4, and it especially wants to hit at 3 to 4 unless the opponent is cornered. Knee Bash hits out to 5, but like realistically, most of the time that is a meaningless difference because if you cross out from range 1 because like you called a command grab or something, you're playing against a grappler, you're going to be at the range where Gurren Peacock hits anyways. And also because this is a 4-speed attack with 4 guard, it has more utility on defense against specific things that Knee Bash loses to because Knee Bash is a 2-speed with 5 guard.
Sure. You would lose on defense to spike to sweep. A lot of cards you really don't want to lose to, actually.
Yeah, and similarly, I think that Gurren Peacock is also a deceptively good card on defense, so long as you are fine with not getting the full value out of it. Like, if you trade 5/4 into assault, that sucks. But also you're Ken. You're a character that is mostly bad on defense and awesome on offense. Establishing range 2 and forcing a trade on defense might genuinely be worth the gauge premium. And if they played Spike, they got owned so hard that they might as well just concede immediately.
Right.
So it's a good way to just say, I don't really feel like interacting with this mix-up. I'm gonna pay a lot of money to not have to worry about this. And then the opponent dives you and you're sad, but also if they are playing dive while you have this card live, they are conceding that they are fine with you playing True Master.
They're willing to either take 8 or give you True Master.
Yeah.
So now that we're talking about ultras a little bit, we already mentioned that Ken's Exceed mode is sort of a matchup consideration and isn't really something that he's going to be mashing every game. We've also talked quite a bit about crits. Even I think I've done quite a few Street Fighter lessons at this point. This is the most that crit bluffing has come up out of any.
Bluffing is very real with Ken.
Yeah. So crit bluffing no exceed mode, probably no exceed mode. That's one gauge payout is critting and crit bluffing. That's going to be a large component of my gauge expenditure. It sounds like I'm not going to be using, excuse me, my gauge that much to move around because I have my character ability. But now we're starting to talk about payouts a little bit. What
Yep.
is Ken's economy look like? Like how affordable is Gurren when I'm running the rest of my game plan?
I think it is reasonable to say that in an average game as Ken, you build 5 to 7 gauge usually.
Okay. And part of that is going to be because he hits really hard, and if I'm building more than that, the opponent's probably already dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
So,
if you want to build more gauge than that, you probably can manage it, but you're deliberately playing to build gauge for some reason rather than playing to kill the opponent.
kill the opponent, right? Which is presumably your actual win con. Okay, so some of that gauge is going to. Sorry, I just whoa. There we go. Sorry about that. I had a TTS glitch on my end. Part of that gauge is going to be going to 2 copies of Axe Kick, I assume. I've got 5-ish left. Some of that could go to Gurren, some of that could go to Shinryuken, some of that could go to crits or some crit bluffs. Maybe some of it can go to upkeep and econ. I've had enough lessons with you that I know that you play very flexible characters and you play characters that resist lines like this. Is there any sort of like triaging that I can do with my gauge payouts, or is it really just something that I got to find in the moment?
You should plan to play an ultra at some point in the game.
Okay.
I know that's a really boring answer, but yeah, you're probably going to play one of these. You're probably not going to play multiple of them. The opponent is probably going to take 8 or 11 from it when you play the ultra. You probably that is just the thing that is going to happen as part of just playing the character. You don't actually need to decide which of these you play until like halfway through the game, similar to Giovanna. You might even find that actually maybe you should exceed, or actually I think it's better to just CC all my shit out of gauge and into my hand again.
Okay. So pretty much every gauge payout is going to go towards killing the opponent in some way or another, as long as I'm crutching on my mix-ups well and doing the Ken thing.
Yep.
Gurren is an attack that I've heard you sort of extol the virtues of before, and it seems like a great attack, right? Is part of why we are is part of why I've heard you talk about this glowingly before is that you are trying to push back against this as being the Ken line.
But to a degree, I also think that this card is just a lot better than it looks. Which like you read this and you're like, ah man, it's a 3 to 4, 8, 404, and then like if the opponent
And then I look slightly to the left and see Shinryuken, and I'm like 11 is more than
yeah.
Right.
But like notably, if you do math on like a bunch of ultras, spending 3 gauge to hit the opponent for 8 is a pretty efficient rate. It's almost the same rate that Shinryuken gives you, because this is 4 for 11. Both of these are a little less than 3, and 3 is the breakpoint of like, holy shit, this ultra is turning money into killing the opponent at an extremely efficient rate.
Right. Okay. So these ultras are competitive with one another. I'm not using them in the same range. They're not competitive in terms of like, well, I have both in my hand. Which one am I going to play? I look at my position and I play the one that's going to win me the game. But I should be considering both of these as gauge payout options pretty evenly, or maybe just matchup dependent.
Yeah, and like the other big consideration here is keeping this live means that the opponent has to keep tech live, which means that they are opening themselves up to reading.
Okay.
And because we're a big dumb mix-up character that can shit damage like crazy, making it so that you can reasonably guess that they have a specific card in their hand with reading means that they are probably going to take a lot of damage off of getting reading punished by reading if you choose to go with that line.
Okay.
So this also acts as a really useful forcing play of just simply not playing the Gurren Peacocks, like not playing them in either way.
Sure, just getting value out of them from the threat of them, and then exploiting the known counterplay.
Yeah, and then like if you don't care about it getting teched, play True Master. True Master is a really, really good boost. I'm probably slightly underplaying the importance and utility of True Master because everyone knows that +2 power and +2 speed is a good boost. I
Right,
don't need
yeah.
to explain all of the ways that it's a good boost. It makes all of your cards absolutely fucking bonkers.
Yeah, like what cards just among the normals? Like, all right, so it makes uh this unreasonable, this pretty unreasonable. What else we got? What else does True Master make ridiculous?
It makes this card mostly unbeatable. It makes this card literally unbeatable. Literally, the worst case among the normals is playing Grasp or Focus, and it's like, wow. My worst case is a card that is speed 9 or a card that is speed 3 and has Focus's defensive stats and also hits for 6.
Right. And then we look over into specials and ultras land. Axe Kick gets insane. This is honestly, this seems pretty real as a non mix up threat at this point. Like I'm slightly under curve. Um, yeah, honestly, I
This
like
is one to
Hadouken
five
seems
seven power attack.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
This
Hadouken
this
hits for 8 and at speed 6.
this beats sweep. This is you're kind of using it for the same thing, but now it's suddenly a speed 9 attack that hits for 6. Like every single card gets crazy with that boost.
Yeah, Garden Peacock is above curve. It's speed 6 and also hits for 10.
Yeah.
Which is just straight up Vega numbers, like Vega exceed mode numbers.
Okay, so yes, Gurren is awesome. We're fighting back against the Gurren hate because True Master is so popular, but also True Master really good. Maybe use that
Yeah.
boost.
Like, think of Ken as a choose your own adventure, and at some point you're going to have to make decisions, and those decisions will be meaningful. And you're going to make decisions that are meaningful with literally all of these cards. But like, don't let Knee Bash being a little mediocre, sure you can be a little mediocre, or Gurren Peacock having a really, really good boost on it, stop you from playing these attacks. The fact that these are attacks where people don't see them as attacks because of the quality of the boosts or the lackluster nature of these attacks makes them all the scarier as mix-up options that you can throw out 1 out of every 3 games. Because if the opponent isn't expecting Gurren Peacock, they are going to lose to Gurren Peacock, and they will lose to the tune of 8 or 9 damage.
Yeah, that's very real. Or they're going to lose to reading into something into Gurren Senpu. Like you can make a predictable opponent pay very hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing that I really enjoy about Ken in general is that the character allows you, the player, to lean into more player psychology elements of Exceed that a lot of characters can do, but don't necessarily reward you for doing as much. Because like if you have a sick read on the opponent, they fucking die really hard. Like if you have a clean read on the opponent, and you defend with Axe Kick, and it actually beats them. Like, oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like if the damage doesn't kill them, the mental damage does. Like they're questioning their life decisions at that point. You can exploit that next on your turn. They don't know what you're doing next.
Yep.
So okay,
All right, so I feel like I've
I'm
talked
sorry.
about a lot about all the attacks and also like Ken's general mix-up structure and like the character is a pressure character. The character is a pressure toolkit character specifically that cares a lot about positioning, but also has the means to get in if he needs to get in, and also the threats to force the opponent to get in if he doesn't want to do it himself.
Okay,
So let me talk about like the last part of that pressure
I was about to
with
ask.
these 2 boosts because I just simply haven't mentioned them yet. This is your I want to pass turn. I want to do it in a way that is more meaningful and doesn't just like completely wreck my defense. You will often play this boost just because it is the best thing you can do if you don't want to strike, and also it's on a like kind of meta attack. But it's a pretty mad boost that like does a useful thing on a pretty mad attack that does a pretty useful thing. This one is actually like pretty useful. It's pretty real. Notably, because it has hit gain advantage on it, this effectively forces the opponent to strike. So you need to be ready with a reasonable defense available to you if you want to take this and turn it into this is just like deluxe prepare / change cards action. But if you're fine with that, play this. It's awesome. It allows you to keep your hand full because it's drawing you 3 cards, which is a decent amount of card velocity. And if you're out of range that you like, it's awesome. And if the opponent passes turn to you, they get owned really hard because this combined with either of these is a deluxe mix-up payout, and you can just actually play honest and just like throw the 6 power execute them, because even if they sweep you, who cares? You hit them for 6 and gained advantage.
Advantage, and here's another mix-up coming your way. Okay, so these are both pass turn boosts. This is obviously also a pass turn boost, but this is establishing a very real threat that the opponent has to deal with right now. This actually is a threat too. It's just a threat that isn't stats.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the threat of a future payout that it would be a lot worse for you if you don't respond to this by getting rid of it.
Okay.
Notably, that means they're not going to attack. They aren't going to attack it. They're just going to strike it,
right.
because it doesn't actually change your positioning much.
Right, and they're saving their text for this.
Yeah.
So this is something that makes your opponent strike into you to avoid the gain advantage rider. You've already mentioned that Ken isn't particularly good on defense. Am I looking for specific cards that are going to, obviously besides like sweep and focus, that are going to let me play this card safely, or is it more just like, sometimes I'm just going to need the 3 cards, and if they give me the gain advantage, I'll take it.
If you have a reasonably sized hand, like if you have 3 cards in your hand, 3 or 4 cards in your hand, when you choose to boost this, I guess technically even up to 5 cards in your hand, which would be boosting it, going to 4, and then drawing to 7.
Right.
Among those cards, if you have like options that you are willing to play on defense, a cross, maybe a grasp, just oh yeah, like if they play something, I'll just run this because the things I'm afraid of are things that lose to this.
Right.
Then like that's basically all you're looking for. Ken's defense is not great, but it's mostly just committal. And as long as you're willing to commit to like your choice, you're probably going to be fine.
Makes sense. And again, the upside of getting the threat, I shouldn't expect to get this. If I ever do, I shouldn't expect to get the advantage. If I ever do, awesome, I can make them blow up. Just the threat might be enough as a pass turn boost to get some value out of this boost.
Yeah, it's a pressure tool.
Okay. That makes sense. All right, so that's every card in the kit, that's every boost in the kit.
Yep.
It sounds like the commonality between the line that we're not recommending and the line or the sort of philosophy that we are recommending is that this card's insane. The things that it enables in your kit are insane. This card's insane. Find ways to crutch on these and use them to enable the rest of your game plan.
Yep, and like flexibility is pretty important. So like, don't think of any of these tools as just, oh, this is an attack, this is a boost. Like don't I would recommend against doing that. And like if the opponent for whatever reason is letting you, like if you notice that they just aren't teching this, then yeah, you can go back to Execute Turbo. I will give you permission to knowledge check the opponent to death.
Right. Okay, makes sense. So again, that's the kit. Sounds like a solid game plan. I have a couple of questions about some neutral stuff, and then maybe we can talk about normals.
Sounds good.
How do I get from here to here?
Oh, well, that's the neat part. You don't. Jokes aside, Tatsu, Grasp, Cross, these all move you to a different board position. The opponent could like theoretically cross out of you, but that's not something that necessarily you should rely on.
Right.
A lot of the game is going to be happening at range 1 just because of the nature of your kit. Plan around that. The mix up of like the overpower crit mix up is pretty real at range 1 as well, because this covers.
This is still really scary.
Yeah, this covers the grasp, which like covers these two. So like they still have to hold this mix up pretty hard at range 1. So like you can still run this. This is still a very real threat. And in that way, like your mix up shape is still pretty stable. You have boosts, you have good boosts, you have classic normals, you have true master. So like setting up a situation where you can just do something safe is okay. And like the opponent is probably not going to tech your light or like, for example, defends.
True master.
Because they really need to tech true master. And like if they tech a light, that's one less tech for true master if you choose to go that route.
Right.
So you can just like do like basic regular like exceed pressure with boosts
Okay.
to
And
help
many
with
of
like
these things just work at range 1
playing.
just fine.
Yeah, you just help with like playing the game at range 1, the range where you're going to be at. Also, you have this attack that hits for 4 at speed 7. It's kind of neat, I guess.
Okay. So because Ken is a pressure character, he's rushing you down. You wouldn't advocate unless you have like a hand that I don't know. They have 6 life left, and you have EX Axe Kick in your hand or something, but they have I don't know EX Grasp still alive. You're not going to say. I had to think really hard to find an example here. You're not going to say take the move action to here. You're going to do that during strikes whenever you possibly can.
It is rare that I would be like, yeah, it's time to walk as Ken, because like if you need to walk, especially to walk backwards, it's like okay, like why though? Just like win a mix up with Cross if you need to
Right.
establish range.
Right. And then throw Hadoken, make them come to you or something. Okay. But Exceed combat tends to trend toward range 1 anyway. So
Yeah,
it like I might have to do some extra work to find my favorite range, but I can win a game from here. I can win a game from here. This is not ironclad the way that range 1 is ironclad for Zengi, for example.
yeah.
Okay. Um and then sort of related to the question about the move action, how is his economy? I see a couple of draw boosts. I see a lot of very flexible gauge payouts, including a lot of crits that I would like to be doing as much as humanly possible, and also a character ability that does 50% of the neutral that I want to be doing at least 50% of the time. How much more do I need? How many change cards actions? How much gauge in neutral am I going to need to spend on this guy?
A lot of cards in, a lot of cards out. Character's economy is pretty good, but he also can be a little bit expensive. The character does so much damage that oftentimes you only are going to find yourself in a situation where you simply don't have cards, only like once or twice a game. Um, because Ken is a reasonably well-rounded character, that isn't like all in on offense. Like he's really good at it. He wants to do it a lot, but like you can take a turn or two off to prep if you need to, but also you can just change cards if you need to. You might even find that like maybe you'd rather CC Shinryuken or Gurren Seppuku because drawing additional cards out of your deck is better than the threat of the Ultra. Like that is a viable option.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
as
So
mentioned, CCing Gauge is another thing that you sometimes do. That would only be like you blew out your hand completely, and you need a refill. Like meaningfully need a refill for that to be viable, but it's happened sometimes.
okay, and you would prefer to spend cards from hand in that case, even though you're a mix-up reliant character. You're taking options out of your mix-up because your gauge payouts are that strong.
Uh, if I'm spending like I want to spend cards from Gauge if it's fine to. It's basically just a question of what my plan is for the rest of the game. Because like the situation where I'm CCing an Ultra and the situation where I'm CCing some Gauge are basically the same, which is that I'm conceding that this is an Shinriken game. I don't need this much Gauge,
Okay.
essentially. Which like I have literally said that aloud while playing Ken. Like looking at where things are around the middle of the game, I go, "Oh, this is an Shinriken game," and I just start CCing them away or something. Because
Right.
like this card doesn't do anything if you're not planning on playing it.
Right. And the boost isn't valuable enough. If it isn't a Shinryuken game, this is awesome to force, and you'll use it for movement or change cards or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. All right, that makes sense. Any other economic notes you wanna mention?
Um, Economy's pretty good, as mentioned. Obviously, I've already like impressed that option management is really important because if pieces of your like mix up fall, it is much easier for the opponent to not lose to other parts of your mix up.
Right. Yeah. So take the script, the thing the written guide I'm eventually going to make for this lesson. Control F enable. How often we've said, but yeah, Axe Kick makes Tatsu good. Hadoken makes Nibash good. If you're losing those options, you're not just losing the awesome attack. You're also losing the ability to play this freely,
Yeah,
or play it
similarly,
meaningfully.
like Tatsu and Sweep make Axe Kick a lot harder to answer. Nibash makes Hadoken harder to answer. Like it works the other way around as well.
Right. Right. Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah. Uh, Axe Kick is really, really good. but it can be made better, and the way it can be made better is by playing mix-ups. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Um, does he use the normals the way that any other kind of rushdown oriented character would, or are there any particular special normal considerations, maybe normal boost considerations that we should be making? You already mentioned that whole like, oh my god, he can play cross. Can you believe? Can you believe to learn he can play cross? Anything else?
Dive is an attack that loves boosts. It's good to True Master. Like, that's the only real special consideration as far as that goes. Like, Dive, because it's an attack that is designed to take boosts very nicely, pairs well with our attack customization boost kit, along with True Master. Ken actually gets a deceptive amount of use out of Defend. Like, he's a guy with a bunch of mid speeds, and they are mid speeds that have middling guard values and are crushing. So,
Right.
like, making it so that these things can like force trades in situations where the others otherwise can't, it's pretty mighty.
I was also thinking that Spike seems like, other than maybe some redundancy stuff, Spike doesn't really seem like something that I'm going to be able to get a ton of mileage out of as long as I'm threatening the Axe Kick Tatsu mix up at range 2, because what slow are they going to play safely that I need Spike to cover? Is range 3 Spike something that Ken might play a little bit more often?
Yeah, for the same reasons that other characters would play it, basically, which is like, it's the regular mix-up of Exceed. If you don't represent it, then your offense is predictable, and predictability is the enemy.
Right.
So like, you're gonna play it, but also you're a guy with a whole bunch of mid speeds that are as threatening, if not more threatening, than Spike, and also do like meaningful things to the board state, which Spike doesn't. So like, this is like the least hype of the mid speeds that you can throw, but you'll throw it sometimes anyways, because like, you got to make sure that like the opponent knows that you're gonna play it.
All right, sure. They need to know they need to know that you're crazy. All right, so we talked about cross. I assume like a lot of my movement and utility boosts, like you mentioned that reading is particularly crushing for Ken. I'm going to be using tech when I need to tech. I'm going to be using parry when I need to parry. All of that stuff is going to work pretty much the same as any other character would, I assume.
Yeah, and like I mentioned it right at the start, the existence of Axe Kick makes it so that we get an inordinate value out of power boosts. So like,
Right.
Fierce at a range where Axe Kick is a viable attack, especially with EX Axe Kick live, is like a really strong like forcing play. Because like, yeah, you probably shouldn't play EX Axe Kick, but if you play EX Axe Kick, it wins the strike clean, and also you dealt 8 damage to the opponent.
Yeah, that's an ultra.
You're chilling. Like, yeah, you have to deal with not having Axe Kicks for the rest of the game, but also
They have to deal with having 22 life.
Yeah, there's not going to be much of a game left after that, because you probably have already dealt like 6 to 10 damage to them at least, which means they're at like 12.
Right.
So just make sure you can hurt them or something.
Yeah,
after
you
that.
can probably find a way to close the game out. All right, so power boosts are amazing. Um, surprisingly useful. Guard and armor boost for your various mid speeds. Mid speeds also love speed, but you've hyped up sweep a lot as a way to sort of fill in for Tatsu and do a lot of utility, and also just hitting for 6, and sweep is very strong. Is light also just a really solid boost the way it is for every other character?
Yeah, of course. Like,
okay.
You will boost light sometimes. You will play sweep a lot. Sweep is a very important part of Ken's mix-up shape, for the reasons I've explained already. Sweep and focus are your stable slows. So like, both the boosts on these are great. They do specifically useful things for Ken for obvious reasons, but these are also like very useful attacks that do things that you don't get otherwise throughout your kit, because you have a slow with bad guard versus a slow with good guard. You don't have anything that like preserves positioning and is like doesn't really lose in the way that focus does, because why would Ken have that?
Right.
So like, these are useful for like making sure that that you can keep the opponent honest, or like making it so you don't have to call a mix up once or twice without needing to pay the premium of saying, I don't really care.
Yeah, I win the strike.
I don't lose the strike, but I might also just win the strike. Is
right.
is the bet of Gurren.
Right. Okay. So for the most part, other than a couple of considerations animated by his kit, the normals are going to be used the way other characters would use them.
Yeah, and like Ken's kit accents the normals nicely, because the normals lack very potent mid speeds. So giving yourself a whole kit of mid speeds, and then a couple things to accent that, which like is literally what Ken has for a kit shape.
Sure.
And notably, a lot of Shotos have as their kit shape. It's just that the safety and threat of the mid speeds tends to differ Shoto to Shoto to give them the exact flavor feel that they have.
Sure.
So Ken is
and Ken's going to be
notably
slightly higher
unsafe
risk,
and
slightly
notably
higher reward.
punishing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I have a sort of a slightly more, I guess, like Exceed like philosophy question for you. It's gonna move us slightly out of like Ken's particular kit shape. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about his particular options before we move towards that and maybe start wrapping the lesson up?
Yeah, sure. Here's a really kick-ass way to initiate with Gurren Senpukyak.
Oh yeah, I love Assault that hits for 8.
Yeah, it's sick. So like I've talked a lot about how this is like a card that has a lot of properties that allow it to often not lose on defense. It also is a great card to initiate with for all the same reasons. And if you're afraid of initiating with an attack that like can lose to Assault at range 3, and technically 4 as well, although the way that it loses to Assault is not as crippling, you can just like make it so that's not the case. It's really funny.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it turns out that +1 speed now strike on something that is just barely below curve, but also hits crushingly, is going to do pretty well for itself. Honestly, in a very similar way to what this would do to a fast dive or a character with a fast dive, or what this would do to a character with a DP or something. Like, it's an enabler.
Yeah. Now you're seeing the vision.
That sounds awesome. Okay, yeah, I'm a firm convert to the Ken way of thinking. Sorry, Ryu. On that subject, though, when I learned Exceed, and I think that this is actually kind of a commonly held viewpoint, defense in Exceed, especially at the time, right? Like Exceed design has moved away from this a little bit, but defense in Exceed and boosting and establishing threat into your opponent's turn in Exceed, I think to a lot of people sort of makes more intuitive sense than Rushdown. I personally, and I know quite a few players, actually sort of struggle with aggressing in Exceed because it doesn't feel safe to them. And I feel like there's not going to be too many characters that this is more suited as part of the lesson plan to talk about than it is with Ken. Can you give like an incredibly brief primer on what if like structuring effective offense looks like in Exceed? You've already mentioned option management. You've already mentioned mix-ups. What am I doing to what can you tell the people who are a little bit afraid and trepidatious about being a Rushdown character?
So like I'm sure it's come up at least at one point in one of these videos, but the general idea that like if you want to strike clean, it's really strong, and a really consistent way to do that is to boost.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other consistent way to do that is to initiate strikes, because you are choosing the range in which they happen. If you're a character like Ken that has now strike boosts, all of Season 7 as well, this trait applies to things that can modify the board state and also immediately lead into a strike. The opponent has to plan around so many potential realities that it's going to be difficult for them to do that meaningfully. And then in addition to that, for a character like Ken, I already mentioned this, but you have a lot of really high EV things that you can do, because like if the opponent calls any of these wrong, as mentioned, they're taking 5 to 8. And like if they call 2 of those wrong, they lose. So like they need to call basically the same number correctly. Right? Yeah, they need to call the same number correctly, and then probably an additional one after that. Because like Grasp only does 3 damage. If you're losing to Grasp and you lose to it like twice, well, congratulations, they no longer have Grasp, which means your Shinryuken is way more free.
Right, and it turns out that Shinryuken deals more damage than 2 Grasps does.
Yeah, so like losing sucks, and you don't want to like continually just like throw losing plays, but you don't need to throw losing plays. You have a lot of tools to make your plays much more consistent, much more threatening, much safer, just straight up safer.
Right.
You have plays to keep yourself ahead of the opponent. And then when you're in a good position, these plays allow you to say like, okay, call this mix, idiot. And then if they call it wrong, like, awesome, they have lost like a third of their life.
Right. Okay. So the sort of, I guess the diametric opposite here, the thing again, the very first lesson here was on Akuma and sort of like that the defensive set play life where you are setting up strikes sometimes over multiple turns in order to do everything you can to get like absolutely guarantee safety and value. And if you tried to do, and you sort of mentioned that Ken could do things like that, and people have found success at doing the turbo axe kick thing. But if you are trying to structure your offense like that, you're giving up the exact thing that you just mentioned as being the greatest enabler of offense, which is that you can dictate the terms of the strike and win speed ties.
You dictate the terms of the strike, win speed ties, and also you are setting the pace of the game. Is the other big thing.
Okay. All of those things in aggregate, when a character's kit supports it, equals or is better than the safety provided by a defensive set play character. Is that sort of the position?
Yeah, and even for a character like Akuma, like in that lesson, there was a lot of talk about the more standard safer Akuma lines, but like YOLO Akuma, as it's often called, the like rush down, I'm throwing mix ups, call this shit Akuma,
Yeah,
has reasonably high EV as well. It's not actually that much lower than playing the slower, steadier lines. It just also makes it so that the game is resolved in about like 3 or 4 interactions total.
right. Right. Yeah, it's exceed when you have a bus to catch. So
And I know that not everyone necessarily wants to play Exceed, but it's resolved in 3 or 4 interactions total. But like, if that's what you're looking for and that's what you want, like play Akuma like that. Play
yeah,
Ken. Period. He's really great at doing that, and he's in a lot of ways more stable than Akuma.
yeah, and you're not, and my point in asking the question is that you're not handicapping yourself by doing that. Like I think that it is because defensive set play, like breakpoint math, is easier to internalize than the heuristics and metrics of good offensive play, I think. But offensive play and Exceed, when a character supports it, is just strong. You can do it.
Yeah, like
Okay.
winning clean is good. Period. Winning clean is a strong and consistent way to win games. Period. If that means that you need to be initiating a shitload of strikes and making them high EV and punishing, which is like is the soul bad guy, the Ken, the like Giovanna strat, or in the case of Giovanna, also just like leaning into making the game so fast that the opponent just simply runs out of options.
Sure, yeah. Like, yes, there are answers to all of these. Like, I'm being interactive. Every card I'm throwing has an answer. How many cards you got in your hand? It's less than me
Yeah,
because I'm drawing cards every strike.
like setting the pace and setting it to fast and throwing generally strong shapes that the opponent needs to be committal into answering means that the opponent is basically forced to play the same game as you are. And then like
And your kit supports it better than theirs does.
yeah, you are better at running that game. And even if they have like strong defensive options, you can like choose to beat them. You have ways to construct to beat them. And like you're a Street Fighter character, you have classic normals. You can still play neutral. You can still disrupt the opponent in the ways that every character is able to. And you have your own strong tools that you can lean on to contest as well. This one actually is also relevant for that. Um, I have contested light, the opponent boosting light, by playing quick attack and then setting an EX. It's expensive as hell, but if you need to do it and they lose the strike clean, it doesn't matter that you spent three cards on that because they wasted a copy of sweep.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So and you are the thing you keep coming back to is EV, right? You're looking for things that are going to win you the game.
Yeah,
And
like
the way that you're planning to win the game is reducing your opponent's life total to 0. This seems obvious, but this is how Ken would do that. This is how a rushdown character achieves that goal.
and like EV, because I've said EV and not actually defined it. Expected value. The expected value of all of Ken's attacks is if they land, they win, roughly,
Right.
and they win hard. So the expected value on all of these is if you just hit the opponent with them, is good.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Cool. Um that was my sort of philosophical diatribe sidebar for offensive theory. We've covered normals, we've covered the kit. My last question's on counterplay. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we move into that?
No, and I think counterplay is gonna be really simple. It's the same as with every other character I've covered in this grand old
Call their mix-ups and play good exceed?
series. Yeah, just like be better than your opponent and don't lose to their mix-ups.
Yeah. Watch this lesson on XS Exceed, figure out what Ken is trying to do, get on the right Yomi layer, and call their mix, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like play good neutral, especially if like you expect that they won't be able to respond to it effectively because they're managing their resources bad. Which like I know relying on your opponent to make a mistake is like not stable, but like that's just how it be sometimes. The game can be a skill off, and you need to be better than your opponent.
Okay. And I mean, very similar to what we've talked about with every other character. This is a trend in Blues lessons. If people are tuning into this one for the first time, or this is the first time they're tuning into a Blue lesson, um, inherent in the character is that you are running interactive offense. You aren't doing anything completely like unstoppable, unbeatable. If your
Yeah,
opponent just interacts correctly, you will not win the game.
and accordingly, like if the Ken player is doing this, the level one, here's how you can cover that because I know that might actually be relevant for some people because this is a very popular and common line.
Sure.
Um, you probably want to reserve your blocks for Shinryuken. You can also like parry axe kick, but like I don't know. You probably want to save at least one of them for this. So like I don't know, maybe first one parry axe kick, second one block Shinryuken. Um, you need to tech this. If the Ken player is like actually doing the counterplay to this, then that's where you get to have some fun with the first copy of parry. But yeah, it like you're basically playing against Akuma, and you beat the character the same way as you beat Akuma, which is disrupt using the disruption tools that exist within the game in the correct ways, and then this line kind of falls apart.
Right. And then what he's left with is mix up tools that don't have their core and no ultra payouts.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Because he committed his ultra payouts to a boost that got teched and an attack that got blocked. You still have to like probably call some mix-ups in this like iteration of this, but like this is like the really simple way of doing it is like if you block Shinryuken and he was putting his all into trying to kill you with it, then he's really really sad because the offensive momentum that is lost from this card getting blocked is often actually worse than the amount of resources that the opponent had to spend to actually block Shinryuken because you know it is still an 11 power attack.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, if like if the sort of the wisdom of blocking is that you want to save your block for something really really big and scary. 11 is big and scary.
It certainly is. But yeah, you can kind of think of this as like fighting a character like Fights or Remulus, where those characters are defined by the gaps in their offense where you are allowed to play the game. When Ken
Right.
is doing this line, he is opening himself up to the same pattern where if he's spending like he needs to make his stuff as unbeatable as he wants it to be, then he is giving himself gaps in pressure that you can take advantage of. And because
Sure.
Ken is a character that has lackluster middle defense, he's probably not thinking that much about how to actually handle that. And if he is, sometimes that happens. Exceed be like that, you know?
Well, but it like there is kind of like a point by system. If he's leaning that hard into the sort of like I guess offensive set play, then like how is he also maintaining the tempo to to keep you
Yeah.
constantly on the back
Uh,
foot to guessing his mix-ups? There has to be some give there. You can't run
yeah,
both lines
specifically
to
I'm
their full
referring to
effectiveness.
not offensive mix-ups, but a defensive mix-up, like winning with cross, for example, which is
Right.
the thing that Ken can do, and also make like actual bank off of doing that. But like, keep track of your opponent's options. You're fighting against a mix-up character. You should be doing that anyways.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense. Um Final question. We can wrap it up. Go home early. Barely call this access exceed. This is like adequate exceed at this point. We're an hour and 20 minutes in.
Oh man,
Um,
Wallen.
yeah, we're moving. My final question: if we have converted a bunch of people to the Ken lifestyle, and this is their very first Excess Exceed lesson. And they're like, man, where can I find other characters like Ken? We've already mentioned a few. We've mentioned Soul Bad Guy. We mentioned Giovanna. Who else feels a little bit like Ken that players might want to try out?
Reese from Red Horizon. If you're willing to play overpowered characters, Jamina and Juno from Esper Cross. Just gonna skip over season 2. Like, to a degree, Carl Swanky, but it's a little bit different.
Sure. Yeah, you're at least getting big red numbers and cool mix-ups out of Carl.
Sea Viper has a heavier emphasis on the attack customization, but it's more all-in offense, like rushdown style. Guile has similar patterns of like can play neutral, but also is offensively oriented with like strong mix-ups and
Has
a lot
of
of
mid speeds.
If you want a like version of Ken that has a stronger boost game, Akuma is good for that. The like really offensive Ryu lines where you lean heavy into like Donkey Kick and Tatsu play similarly to Ken. Cammy is kind of a mix-up character, but the actual shape of it is pretty different. Sort of beheaded, but not really. Ragna, obviously, Jin. 2-degree Bang, although Bang is a little bit more Ryu-ish in his shape. 2-degree Lychee, although she has a lot of like oddity that you have to deal with. The big one would definitely be Ragna. Would be like the easiest recommend from BlazBlue.
Sure.
Yuzuriha for like a character that just like plays Exceed and has a lot of stats. Enkidu, if you are fine with having more committal but also more bullshit defense, and also like different resource management. Lina, similar to like Reese. That's a red Shoto that has like a more advantage chain focus. Oh, Noelle. Forgot to mention Noelle. She's more like faster than Ken, but also is very mix-up oriented.
Yep.
Mei, Ino, Soul, certain Kai lines, but like less so than Ryu. I would probably recommend Ryu if you want to play a blue Shoto in a funny way. Giovanna, Baiken and Giovanna like basically took like Ken's playstyle and moved it in slightly different directions, but both like play very similarly.
They're Ken's kids.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, lots of good characters then.
Yeah, if you like Guile, like you try out Guile and you're like, that's cool, but I want like something that is a little bit higher tempo than like Gold Lewis is pretty good for that.
Okay. Yeah. So tons of different flavors of offense. You can find something that'll suit your playstyle if Ken isn't quite hit. But it sounds like honestly, give him a try if you haven't already. He sounds really, really fun.
Yeah, in a lot of ways he's Mr. Exceed. He is a pretty good like Exceed character that plays Exceed and also is a good representation of your skill as at Exceed put into the table and like showing you with feedback how you're doing.
I can see why you like the character then, Blue. Given the pattern established by your previous lessons and the counterplay that you advocate for your characters in previous lessons, I can see why Mr. Exceed would resonate with you.
Yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah. All right. I think that I've learned clearly everything there is to know about Ken. I'm now a Ken master, a true master, if you will. Blue, thank you so much for the lesson. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
It was a great time as always. Hopefully we can get back to recording these more consistently.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So everybody, look forward to another 7-month break. And I will see you for the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all later. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great day.